Okay, so I recently pointed out that FDR and LBJ revisionists often fail to mention the constant majorities and supermajorities that they enjoyed. Richard Wolff and Ryan Knight recently did the same on the Vanguard podcast. Only, instead of FDR being a genius negotiator, apparently, the reason he pushed New Deal initiatives was due to all the pressure from communist and socialist organizations. No mention of the insane congressional majorities he had throughout his tenure, at one point having roughly 80% of the Senate. And all of this, in a time before the two-track system made it possible to maintain a filibuster against a majority and therefore abuse it. Now, let's take a listen.
Unemployment insurance, create the structures of a civilized society that we have. Great society, adding Medicaid, saving millions of lives. Meanwhile, terrible evil.
I have to jump in. The reason the New Deal was passed is because we had a strong socialist party, a strong communist party, and a strong labor movement that pressured FDR and pressured the Democrats to act. And so this idea that you have to be...
Mr. Roosevelt is like Mr. Biden in the sense that both were centrist Democrats when they ran for office in most of their political lives. But what changed was when Mr. Roosevelt won the election in 1932 and became the president, he confronted an economic crisis even worse than the one that Mr. Biden has inherited. But that's not the crucial difference. The crucial difference was that within a couple of years of the great crash of 1929, a historical shift to the left in the United States got underway. We had, and this is really important for people to understand, the most massive movement to organize workers into unions we've ever seen in the United States. We've never had anything like it before. We've never had anything like it since. Millions and millions of Americans quickly joined the CIO unions. These were people who had never been in a union before, whose parents had never been in a union before, but who joined the union out of a sense that their lives, their well-being, their survival in the Great Depression depended on it. And working very closely with the CIO were two socialist parties and a communist party that were at their peak of social influence, counting tens of thousands of activist members, closely allied with and often the leading militants in the unionization drive of the CIO. These social forces, mobilized in this very effective way, went to Mr. Roosevelt and basically gave him an ultimatum. If you do what we want you to do to help people through this depression, we will make you the president because we have the votes to do it. And if you don't, you won't become the next dog catcher in town because we'll vote against it. Now,
of course, it's true that there was a strong leftist movement. But that movement also caused more people to vote Democrat instead of voting Republican. Wolff is tiptoeing around this, and my guess is, it's because he's more interested in encouraging people to get out and get involved, which is, of course, a good thing. Also, I'll link to my videos debunking the myth that Obama ever had a supermajority. But the Cliff Notes version is that the Democrats never had 60 Senate seats under Obama. There was a short window of roughly 5 months when, if you count Joe Lieberman, who was not a Democrat and who had endorsed John McCain, you could sort of attribute 60 Senate seats to Obama. But this is a stretch. That Obama had a supermajority was really a GOP talking point, but less informed content creators on the left have unfortunately adopted it. Oh, one more thing. If you've bought into the narrative that there's no difference between the two parties, and that their constant battle is a ruse, then ask yourself, why aren't the Democratic majorities and supermajorities under FDR and LBJ more commonly known? If voting in more Democrats won't make a difference and won't upset the powers that be, whoever they are, then why is this probably the first time you're seeing this information? To me, the take-home lesson is clear. If we want ambitious progressive proposals passed, we need more Democrats in the House and especially the Senate. The more progressive the Democrats, the better. The Democratic pie needs to grow at the expense of the Republican pie, which means we need to disabuse people who vote Republican of right-wing economic thinking. Doing so requires actually reaching out to people who hold these beliefs, as well as debunking said beliefs. At the very least, we need to shrink the Republican pie. Even if you dislike the Democratic Party and prefer to work with a third party, simply splitting the party isn't going to get us the numbers needed to pass progressive legislation. Those numbers need to come from the GOP, or we'll never have a coalition large enough to pass more ambitious legislation. By reaching out to people, I don't just mean debating them. I mean phone banking and canvassing for local organizations, which is what Richard Wolff is implying anyhow. I've included a link to a list of progressive organizations provided by Start Guide. I hope it helps. Also, I've linked to a video that dives into the 1932 elections as well as the implementation of the New Deal, from a channel that focuses on history. Here is a snippet. Enjoy.
And the Democrats pick Franklin Roosevelt. And I know what you're thinking, instant name recognition. And yes, he is a distant cousin of Theodore Roosevelt. He came up in the Democratic Party, became governor of New York in 1928, and in the election of 1932, promising a New Deal. And there's his famous quote, "I pledge you, I pledge myself to a New Deal for the American people." And it sounds really good, and he projected a lot of optimism and energy, but the reality is in 1932, no one really knew what he meant. It was not a organized, pre-planned set of programs. If anything, he really didn't have any blueprint or concrete ideas, but what he did project was this desire to do something. We need action. And you can see in this political cartoon, Franklin Roosevelt is playing the role of doctor with his New Deal remedies, and he's got the medicine, and there's all sorts of different types of medicine for the sick nation, the sick Uncle Sam. And so in 1932, the nation voted, and the results. What a nail biter. Franklin Roosevelt is elected President of the United States. It is a beatdown. Hoover only carried 6 states in the Electoral College. He didn't do well at all. Democrats, perhaps even more importantly, won majorities in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. And so the Democrats in 1932, have a mandate from the American people. They have the power, not only the executive, but the legislative power to create change. Whatever that change would be, we will see. And one other outcome of the election of 1932 is it is the beginning of what becomes known as the New Deal coalition. In the following election in 1936, you're going to get various groups coming together to support the Democratic Party. You're going to get African Americans, which historically had voted for the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln. You get working class voters, especially organized labor and labor unions, people in urban areas, various ethnic and racial groups, and farmers coming together to form this New Deal coalition that'll last pretty much up into the late 1960s, early 1970s for the Democrats. In many ways, the election of 1932 will become a turning point. Those policies, those GOP policies, this limited federal government philosophy of the Republicans, Harding, Coolidge, Hoover, well,
I'm different, yeah, I'm different. I'm different, yeah, I'm different. I'm different, yeah, I'm different.
Roosevelt is going to bring a very different view about the role and the responsibility of the federal government in the years to come. Now, Franklin Roosevelt will become the 32nd President of the United States. He will take office in 1933, and he will serve it until 1945, our longest serving president ever. He will be elected 4 terms. And he is not going to go at this alone. He's going to have a group of advisors, a very diverse group of advisors known as the Brain Trust. These were those individuals who helped him develop his New Deal programs. Many of them had worked with him when he was governor of New York, and amongst them was Francis Perkins.